Yeah.
Hey, how's it going, everyone? This is the Anime Man. I don't know how many of you know a little genre of videoing called J-vlogging or Japan vlogging, but if you've stumbled onto any J-vlogging channel where they talk about Japanese food, Japanese culture, Japanese customs, all that kind of stuff, then you've most likely stumbled upon a video of theirs that talks about the Japanese language. Or more specifically, some kind of clickbaity bullshit title of a video that goes something along the lines of how to learn Japanese in the best way possible for free. The secret to learning Japanese revealed. Tips and tricks learning and improving your Japanese. By the way, that is not me throwing shade at anonymous J-vlogging channels, because all of the video titles you just heard are in fact my videos. Such biting commentary only from the Anime Man channel. But the reason why there are so many videos like that with similar titles much like those is because there is a huge demand for it. Anybody on the internet who has fallen in love with not just anime and manga, but Japanese food, Japanese TV, Japanese music, any subculture of Japan and otaku and anything Nipponjin that you can think of, they most likely want to learn the language that comes along with it because it seems fun and interesting. And look, my boys, I'm totally for that. If more people can go out there and try and learn the language while respecting the culture and everything along with it, then I golf clap them for their optimal effort. But it seems that there is one article out there that one of you lovely motherfuckers linked to me over on my Twitter so graciously, thank you very much, that seems to, disagree with a lot of those points. And let me tell you that it definitely caught my interest, especially with a title that simply reads, "Why You Shouldn't Learn Japanese." Oh, this is gonna be good, my boys. And look, I'm all for unpopular opinions. I mean, hell, I do that shit all the time on this channel. But as I was reading through this think piece with a rather open mind and actually read between the lines and started to look quite deeply at what this article was trying to say, the more I started to think that this is more of a stink piece. A stink piece that I think deserves a little bit of criticism and critique from your boy. So that's exactly what I'm gonna do in this video. So without further ado, let's examine. The article starts off with multiple paragraphs that basically say something really fucking obvious to anybody who wants to learn Japanese, in that Japanese takes a lot of time to learn. Look, everyone thinks they can learn Japanese quickly, fueled in part no doubt by the number of websites claiming to help you do so if you buy their products. No, they don't claim that. They claim that you can learn Japanese faster than, say, if you used other websites or used a completely different method of learning like textbooks and or any other personal ways that people learn the language. Because again, learning a language, not just Japanese, takes a lot of fucking time. That's just how these things work. It doesn't really matter about personal preference. Languages are not a thing that you can rush because it's not that type of skill. You can't just walk into an art gallery and start fucking painting Picasso after the third time you've picked up a paintbrush. Language, much like that allegory I just said, is an art. You need to practice over and over and over again with all sorts of different methodologies that you have to just figure out through trial and error, and that takes a lot of fucking time. At first I thought it would be enough just to master some survival phrases, but every time I met someone they asked me questions I couldn't answer, so I learned more until I could finally have a conversation. Then I wanted to have a longer, more interesting conversation until eventually I realized what I really needed was to make myself understood in both speech and writing at roughly the same level I'm at in English. In other words, even fluency wasn't enough. It's a little bit like putting yourself through high school and college all over again, alone, in Japanese. I don't know if it's just the way that it's being phrased or if I'm the only one that thinks this, but first world problems much? Look, I don't know what part of the world the writer of this article lives in, but it seems like a pretty fucking common occurrence for anyone who is trying to learn any new language out there. Because you say you want to learn more and more words to try and become fluent and have longer conversations in Japanese, yet at the same time you complain that you don't want to study any more than you already have because you've already studied it enough. Early in the article, the author kind of boasts in a quite confident kind of tone by stating that he's spent at least 4,000 hours actively studying, and that's not counting watching Japanese movies, singing karaoke, having conversations all day long in Japanese, and working in Japan. Okay, my boy, so you're really gonna go out of your way to start boasting about the fact that you've spent roughly half a year's worth of hours trying to learn Japanese, and yet you're still frustrated that you can't be fluent enough. Well, motherfucker, why don't you try day doing it for, I don't know, 200,000 hours, which is what I had to do in order to probably get to a point where I can confidently say that I am indeed fluent in Japanese. Because you're not the only one that has spent all of this time trying to learn Japanese, trying to understand their culture, and doing all sorts of very Japanesey activities in Japan. You're not fucking special, my dude. A lot of people have done it. Yeah, it's hard. Get over it. So in the next part, the writer goes on to say that out of the hundreds and thousands of people who have started to learn Japanese, attempted to learn Japanese, he's only seen a handful of people actually achieve in that desire. Most people seem to last about a year and a half. They're all balls out at the start, and then after several months, it dawns on them that it's a much bigger task than they were led to believe. So be aware of how long it's going to take. If you want to spend the years, you absolutely can do it. But think about whether you want to spend a decade on Japanese before you set out. Doing it halfway seems kind of a waste of time. And you know what? I actually quite agree with this statement. I feel there are way too many people out there, especially younger people out there, who are so blinded by all of these awesome Japanese things that when they actually go out of their way to start learning the language, they kind of forget that it's kind of fucking difficult to do so. Even the biggest weebs out there start to lose a little bit of confidence after they realize that learning a language like Japanese isn't something that you can achieve over a lazy Sunday afternoon. Weirdly enough, out of all of the foreign friends that I know who have achieved some kind of sufficient level of Japanese, almost fluent levels of Japanese, almost none of them can be said are fans of anime, of manga, of games, of anything otaku, or even any kind of subculturally Japanese related thing. They're just purely in love with the entire culture of Japan. What makes up Japan? What makes up traditional Japan? What makes up the language? What makes up the way of living? All of the general things about Japan is what they love and is what keeps them motivating to learn the language. And I think it takes that level of passion and dedication to learn a language, not just Japanese. So definitely keep that in mind before you decide to drop your next paycheck on your new Japanese textbook. The article goes on to talk about the quote-unquote payback of learning Japanese. The article argues that Japanese is only ever useful in Japan. And if you don't make back the time you spent learning the language to go and live in Japan and experience the culture firsthand or possibly work in Japan, then overall it's kind of a big waste of time. Now let's put some facts straight here. Yes, it is true that Japan is really the only country that is known to predominantly speak Japanese as its first language. But to say that Japanese is entirely useless outside of Japan is a bit of an over-exaggeration, and you smell that? Smells like bullshit. Because think about it this way, how many internationally huge companies out there do you know that started in Japan or are owned by some kind of Japanese division? I'm just thinking off the top of my head, and I can think of a bunch of, I don't know, large car companies, large tech companies, large electronics companies, large gaming companies. The list goes on and on. I'm sure you can look around in your room or house and you will find at least one thing in there that is owned by some kind of Japanese company. And look, that's not to say that you need Japanese in order to, say, work for Nintendo or work for Canon or work for Mitsubishi or whatever, but it certainly looks fucking awesome on your resume if you do decide to apply for companies like that. Truth be told, that I've never publicly said this until now, but I have actually gotten a lot, and I mean a lot, of different job offers before and after starting this whole YouTube thing from Japanese companies because they saw that I was fluent in Japanese. And not just Japanese companies, mind you. We're talking about Japanese companies that went international, and some of the companies weren't Japanese at all. Yes, Japan is the only country in the world that does speak Japanese on a regular basis, but the pulling power of Japan market-wise is humongous and should definitely not be ignored, all because you think that Japanese is a useless language outside of Japan. But nope, the article just completely ignores that fact and actually goes on to further prove his point that Japanese is useless in Japan because Japan has started to adapt English into its vernacular. Riddle me this then, article writer. What if someone can't speak English? English might be the most common language in the world, but that doesn't mean everybody in the world and everybody who visits Japan speaks English. Not to mention that, yes, it is very possible to live in Japan by only knowing a handful of Japanese words, but good luck dealing with the blatant racism and xenophobia that comes along with it. Although not many people like to openly admit it in videos like this, Japan can be, like every other country in the world, a quite xenophobic country to foreigners. And if you're a foreigner that goes to Japan and doesn't even put in the effort to try and learn the language and try and at least adapt in a language basis, it certainly doesn't help that xenophobic notion. Now, while I say that, don't worry, not everyone in Japan is a blatant racist, but that doesn't mean that everybody is innocent either. Racist or not, it's also just a nice notion to show the locals to saying, hey, I actually put in a little bit of effort to try and understand your guys' language. Try and make it so that you guys don't have to freak out whenever you hear me speaking English and try and remember all of those really useless English lessons that you learned in high school all those years ago. Because just a few extra words, a few extra phrases, a few extra jokes can make a conversation with a local go so much further than without it. Okay, this next part in the article is probably the most nonsensical bullshittery I've ever heard, so try and stay with me. The article goes on to say that if you're, say, an English-speaking foreigner who's trying to learn Japanese, you'll actually be less popular with the local Japanese people because all they want to hear is you speaking English. And that Japanese people will only care about all the foreign things back at home and will only compliment you on your Japanese, but will never try to engage you in that way because you're secretly white. That's the stupidest shit I've ever heard! Okay, say that you're sitting at a bar and there are a few Japanese people who approach you and only start speaking English to you. And you start speaking English back and they love it. They love the fact that they are interacting with you in English and then you part ways. Now imagine if that half an hour interaction with this random Japanese person at a bar becomes a lifelong friendship. All these foreign stories to that Japanese person about your home culture and all the things that you did back at home are gonna start to get pretty fucking stale, trust me. Because once they've heard everything about your home country and everything you have to say in English, those Japanese people are gonna start to get pretty fucking bored to put in the effort to try and speak English and will probably start forcing you to learn Japanese to make it easier on themselves to communicate with you. And I know this from first-hand experience. I had a friend back in Japan when I was just visiting, when I was still living in Australia, and that was exactly how it started. I was sitting at a bar and I met this Japanese guy who approached me and started speaking English to me. And I don't know what came over me, but I decided to hide the fact that I could speak Japanese and I could completely understand it perfectly. I just wanted to see the reactions of this Japanese guy whenever I spoke English to him. Fast forward 10 years later and I am still friends with the dude, but guess what? He knows now that I can speak Japanese and he actually has way more fun with me and I have way more fun with him speaking in Japanese. And now guess what? Whenever I'm at a bar, say drinking with a foreigner friend and a bunch of Japanese people approach us starting to speak English, I immediately just start speaking Japanese to them. Does it make me less popular? Fuck no, it doesn't. In fact, very quickly, I actually become the center of attention because not only can I speak Japanese at a fluent level, but they know that I can also speak and understand English. So let me tell you right now, kids, that if you can speak both English and Japanese at any kind of circumstance or place, you will be the most popular kid in the room faster than you can say weeaboo. Trust me. The article ends by saying some really simple line of Japan isn't all that great. Japan isn't as amazing as all these weeaboos think, especially if you go there to work and or live. But I would argue that, motherfucker, if someone was as passionate and dedicated as to learning the language so much so that they want to live in Japan and possibly work in Japan, then they should already know that Japan isn't really the most perfect country and is kind of like every other country. Who would have thought? Just because you had an amazing vacation to Japan, it doesn't automatically make it this utopia of a place to live in. If that logic was the case, then you would see everybody moving to Las Vegas, but that's not the case now, is it? So I think what I basically wanted to say in this video is that kids, and I'm especially talking to you kids, the younger demographic watching this video, you may love your anime, you may love your manga, you might like your Japanese games and any other subculture of Japan that you can think of. You may like all of that shit, but trying to go and learn the language and trying to understand the language at a fundamental cultural level is a completely different ballpark. It's not even the same fucking sport you're playing. if you just do not have the time or the passion or the dedication to just sit down a few hours a day to learn the language, rote learn some words, rote learn some kanji, trying to understand the culture and its people, all of the pros and cons that make up Japan as a country and society, then as the title of this video says, you really shouldn't learn Japanese. But with that being said, don't let a dumb article like this or a video like this persuade you in the opposite direction and force you to throw everything out because it doesn't fit your tastes. Because I feel that language is a lot like food. Just because one person had a hard time swallowing it down, that doesn't automatically make it inedible for you. Similarly, I didn't make this video to forcefully try and scare everybody into the Japanese language, being like, you're gonna have a bad time, that the Japanese boogie monster is here to tell you that Japanese is hard and you should give up now. I don't want this video to discourage anybody who is thinking to start learning Japanese or wants to work in Japan or wants to live in Japan. All I wanted to do in this video and all I wanted to say was to open your eyes and really think about it before you do decide to step into that realm. Because it is no easy feat. Again, I spent probably upwards of 20 plus years learning the language, understanding the culture and everything about it. And here I am standing here in front of you to say that I think that I have finally, after all these years, achieved what I can say is a fluent Japanese level. That's the level of work and dedication you need to put towards this thing. So whatever you decide to do with that after this video, then all I can say is good luck, fam. But guys, let me know what you think about this article and the things I had to say about it. Are there any points that you agreed with me or the article, or points that you disagreed with? Also, if you are learning Japanese as you are watching this video, then let me know what you use to learn Japanese. Do you use websites? Do you use textbooks? Or do you use your own special method to learn the language? I think it would be really interesting to know, especially for those who are thinking to start learning Japanese. So I want you to leave me all that kind of stuff in the comments below. Also, if there are any other articles or think pieces, stink pieces that you want me to react to give my thoughts on, to give my opinions on, then the best place to do it is over on Twitter. So link me your articles over there, link me things that you think are interesting, and if I like it and I have something to say about it, then I'll make a video on it. But to end this video, I just want to say that if this video discouraged you from learning Japanese, then I'm sorry, I'm just here to open your eyes. But if it did encourage you to learn Japanese, then you might want to check out LinguaLift, which is actually a website that I currently back up as probably being one of the best websites out there to learn Japanese. And if you're interested in that, I'll leave the link in the description below. So maybe check it out, see if it's for you, and if it's for you, then why not give it a go? They have a free trial going on right now, so definitely check it out. Links in the description. I think it is so cool that there are so many people, especially on the internet, who do want to learn the language. Like, I think that is so fucking admirable of people to do. And if they can pull it off, that is even cooler. So again, whatever you decide to do, good luck, and I'll see you in the next video. Thanks for watching. As always, like and favorite if you enjoy, subscribe for more anime banner, and I'll see you guys in the next video of whatever I make. Keep watching anime. Ciao!